The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Take Your Quality Management to the Next Level with TechExcel's DevSuite. My name is Renee Alanis. I'm a Senior Marketing Manager here at TechExcel. TechExcel is very proud to host our 2013 webcast series. We hold informative webinars on various topics about once a month throughout the year. Be sure to visit our website at techexcel.com for the current list of webinars. So a little logistics for today. I do encourage all of you to use the question function located at the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Just type in your question and we will answer them at the end of today's discussion. Be sure to also fill out any webinar surveys that we provide at the end of today's presentation. Now I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Jason Hammon. He's the Director of Product Management. Welcome, Jason.
Hello, thanks, Renee. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today in our webinar. Today we're going to be talking about utilizing DevSuite for quality management. What we'll be doing today is I'll give about a 30-minute overview demo of how you can utilize DevTest for quality management, focusing mainly on DevTest, which is our test case and planning and execution tracking tool, along with the integrations between our requirements management and defect tracking tools. At the end of the webinar, as Renee mentioned, we'll be answering questions. So as you add questions via the interface on the right-hand side of your screen, we'll answer any questions that come up, and then also any questions that we're unable to answer during the webinar, we'll also follow up via email. Before we get started on the demo itself, I want to talk a little bit about TechExcel and DevSuite. So TechExcel was founded in 95, so we've been around for quite some time. With our first product shipping in 97, we're 100% privately owned, and we have offices in California, where I'm located today, in the San Francisco Bay Area, also in North Carolina, China, and then also in the UK, just outside of London. In terms of customers, we have a wide range of customers in a lot of different industries. Feel free to go to our website and look at the customer tab if you want to learn more about any of our customers. We have two main product lines. So today we're going to be talking about the DevSuite side, but we also have service and support applications too, you can see here. So today we're going to be talking mainly about DevTest, but I do want to let you know that DevSuite is composed of a number of different modules. So we have DevSpec for requirements management, DevTrack for implementation and defect tracking, DevTest, which is QA test management, so test case tracking, planning, and execution. And we also have a portfolio view that provides you with some product planning function, along with high-level dashboards that are across all of the modules. All of our modules do sit on top of a knowledge base that we call KnowledgeWise that allows you to store documents, images, videos, whatever might be helpful to the development process, and then they can be easily linked to any of the items that you are managing. One thing that is unique about DevSuite that I won't be showing during the webinar today, but I did want you to know about it, is DevSuite does support multi-site deployments. So if you do happen to have an environment where you need to have servers in multiple locations or regions, each site can have its own local database, local web server, and application server so your clients can connect remotely. This allows you to have local performance even when someone is on the other side of the globe, and it also allows you to have some things like conflict resolution. If one of the sites goes down, the other site can continue to operate. Or I shouldn't say go down, but if a site loses connectivity to another site, it can continue to operate independently. Today, because we're going to be talking about quality management, we're going to be talking about a few main item types. So the first one we're going to be talking about is requirements and knowledge items, more on the requirements side, certainly. Next, we'll be talking about test templates and then test tasks. In terms of requirements, The requirements allow you to add any of the document screenshots, things like that that you need to either your requirement view or your knowledge view. Those requirements and specs that you add to the requirement view can be the basis for your test cases. So you can create test cases from the requirements and specs. And then if a requirement changes, you can flag any test cases that are linked to it. DevTest utilizes two main item types. And just to make it easier, once we're into the presentation, I want to kind of go over them with you. First, we have test templates, which are really the items that exist in your test library. So in DevTest, we separate your library from your execution tracking, which allows you to reuse each of these test templates for each product version, or test assignment. For each of the test templates, I can define what are going to be the applicable environments that a test can be used for. We also have an independent status and workflow that can be used if you want to set up an approval process. Any test execution data that is available, so as you assign out these test templates and they're used as test tasks, you'll be able to see that from the library level if you want to assess the quality of your test library. So the corresponding item to the test template is the test task, and that would be the individual test execution record of one of these items. So anytime I assign out a new test cycle to the team to work on, they'll be working on test tasks, which can contain any of the fields that are present on the template, along with specific fields like maybe the build number or the actual time, and of course the status. So the test team will work on those test tasks, and while they're doing that, they'll have visibility into previous instances of that test task. So did it pass last test cycle or build? Were there any bugs found? Maybe I just need to wait and rerun it once the bug's fixed or something like that. We'll also be able to see any knowledge items or requirements that are linked to the template. So I can easily view the requirement and see if this test is, if I need more information, or maybe as part of the test you want them to look at a diagram or something like that. And then each of these test tasks is saved for future analysis, and they become the basis for your reporting, which we'll show in just a second. So that's kind of the overview of the types of items we're going to be managing today and the life cycle that we're going to go through. So we're going to take a look at the QA life cycle, specifically from specs and requirements through the creation of test templates, and then planning and execution. Along the way, we're going to talk briefly about submitting bugs and how that would happen from the DevTest interface. And then also always remember that even though today in the demo I'm not going to talk much about task management or agile management in from a development standpoint, that you can utilize DevSuite to manage your agile projects, to track task and use case implementation, and you know, we'll have other webinars that cover that. Okay, so let's talk about DevSuite for quality management. All right, so I'm going to now move into my instance of DevSuite, and let's start off by taking a look at the DevSuite requirement view and talk about, you know, managing your requirements and how those requirements can then be the basis for your test cases. So right now we're looking at the requirements view, which is made up from DevSpec, our product DevSpec. And what DevSpec allows you to do is to define each of your requirement projects and then to manage your requirements that are in each of those projects by creating individual requirement items. A requirement item can have, you know, any number of custom fields that you want to add to it. You can have images in line, and it will also have its own workflow that can be utilized for that requirement process. As I create my requirements, I can either push test cases directly to DevTest. So by clicking on the Test Cases tab, I can create a new test case directly from DevSpec into DevTest. Or more commonly, which I'll show you in a minute, when I'm in DevTest, I can pull multiple requirements together to create a new test case. One of the things that's kind of unique about DevSpec is it does have the ability to view the items as an individual list here with the fields, or you can view them as a wiki if you want to. And it also has a built-in Word import so that if you ever receive requirement docs or from customers, you can import in the entire Word document and create multiple requirements directly from that document. So today, since we're going to be focusing mainly on quality management and testing, I'm going to move to DevTest and talk about managing a test library, creating tests from DevSpec or from other sources, and then creating test plans. So in the testing view in DevSuite, we have a tree that we utilize to organize your test library. So this tree that we see here is important in that this tree will be used, one, to provide context for your testers in terms of what tests need to be run together. It's also going to be used for planning your new test plans and test assignments. And then it'll also be the basis for the reports that you run. On the right-hand side, I'll see a list of all of the test cases that are contained in each folder. And the details of the test cases will be below. DevTest utilizes a completely customizable UI engine so that I can define exactly what fields I want to see and then organize them in the layout that I would like to see them in. So because I'm using a widescreen laptop today, I might have them organized into a couple columns, but you can organize them however you want, resize fields and add custom fields just via our point-and-click admin. You never need to utilize professional services or something like that to add new fields of all different types into DevTest. For each test that I have here, I'm going to have a number of properties that we can talk about. So today for the sample, I have just a basic title, a test procedure, and expected results. The expected results field could be, in this case, a simple text field, or I might want to have a test that utilizes multiple steps that need to be verified by the tester. I also have a couple time fields that I can use to estimate how much time it will take to run a test, and those time estimates can then be compared with the actuals. The estimates also can be used so that I can see exactly how much time I expect it to take to run a full regression or a full test plan, or if I want to see how much test time is assigned out to each individual. We also have a workflow so that if you want to have an approval process for the creation of tests or pull tests out of circulation when they need to be improved or when they are too old and no longer need to be run anymore. I can create new tests in a number of different ways in DevTest. The first kind of most obvious way is just click New, fill out a dialog, and submit a new test. Any folder in DevTest that we have here in the green folder can have its own set of default values, so you can pre-populate. So when you do submit, click on the dialog, it can be pre-populated with some of the fields that you want for that particular test area. Another way to create test coverage is from DevSpec. So when I click on the New Test from DevSpec button, what this will do is it'll allow me to see the same requirements projects that you would see in the requirement view, and then I can pick any of the requirements that I want to create tests from. And then by clicking the link button, it'll go ahead and create new tests from those requirements and automatically form a link between that requirement and that test case. Additionally, we're going to map over some of the properties of that requirement to the test case just to make it easy. So like a title and the description of the requirement. And then, of course, you could then fill out additional steps or add more information to it. And then you're going to have a new test. By forming that link automatically between the requirement and the test case, we're able to then have a traceability matrix that at the end of the day will show you for each requirement, was a test created, was that test executed, and what the results were. You can also, if you're using DevSuite for your agile management or your development tracking, you could also see linked implementation items to, as well as bugs. A couple other ways I can create test coverage in DevTest is via import. So DevTest supports a number of different import and export options. We can import test cases from a text file in XML. We also just added the ability to import directly from Excel if you have test cases that are in Excel. And then you can also import to those formats as well. The last way to create new test coverage is from existing test coverage. So I can take any section of the tree or individual test cases and I can copy them to a new location to create new test cases that have a whole new ID. Once I've done that, I can use tools that are built into DevTest like Find and Replace to make it easy to update any of the test cases I have. So if you have a situation where a UI element's name's changed or maybe a product's name's changed, it's very easy to update your entire test library in a few clicks to make changes to those specific fields or descriptions. As I create my test cases, each of the test cases are going to have some additional properties that are listed below. So let's take a look at some of the other tabs that show more information about the tests you're working on. First off, I'll be able to see from the linked task tab, I'll be able to see how many times a particular test has been run, and I will also be able to see any bugs that have been found. I can click on those bugs to go directly to them, and I can see them in the list view with the details. Now I should mention that that integration and the ability to see the linked bugs is available for DevTrack, which is our tool, which I'll show you some bug submission in a minute. And it's also available for tools like Jira, Bugzilla, and Mantis. We've also done integrations with other homegrown defect tracking tools, though the UI might vary a little bit if you're using something that's homegrown. I can also, for each of the tests that I'm working on, define applicable environments so that for a particular test case or for a test area in the tree, I can say, these tests are only applicable for Windows 8 or Windows 7. If in DevTest you have designated what environments are applicable, when you create a new test plan or test assignment, you can specify what environments you're going to be testing, and then DevTest will only pull the coverage that's applicable. The other thing that DevTest will do is that if you are, if in a test cycle there is more than one environment applicable for a test case, DevTest can automatically create the appropriate tasks for it. This is particularly nice if you are testing a web app or something like that, where for the most part, the tests themselves are all going to be the same, but you want to make sure it's tested on all the different browsers to make sure it works. So in that case, a single test case could yield many different tasks based on the environments that you want to test. And we'll see once we look at test planning that in addition to just the single environment variables that we might have here, DevTest will actually form combinations so that you can make sure it's tested for specific browsers, platforms, languages all together. For each test, I'm also going to have a full history of who created it, any changes that have been made. If you are in a compliance situation where you need to have an extensive audit trail of each test case, we track just about everything that goes on and every change that's been made along with timestamps. Any test that's created from a requirement will allow you to see on the All Links page that requirement. You can click on it to go take a look at it. Also, if that requirement changes, we do have the option to flag the test cases so that you know that they need to be updated. Once I've created my test library, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the Dev Test Planning view, and we're going to create some new test plans and test assignments. The first thing you'll probably notice when you're looking at the planning view is that it has an additional tree, and this additional tree is used to track your test projects, test plans, and test assignments. So also, a little different from that previous view is we also have some summary data that will show you for each of the test plans, a roll-up of data based on, maybe your releases and test cycles, or your team, or your environment, based on the folders that you're selecting. So I can actually roll up to the root and see all of the test plans we've ever had, so all these different projects, and I'll be able to see for each test cycle how many bugs were found, what percentages were completed, and such. Now, these are just some kind of simple planning dashboards that you can use for helping figure out what you should be running. We also have a full report view, and we also have a homepage dashboard too, where you can have graphic reports. And after we kind of walk through the life cycle here, we'll take a look at those reports so that you can kind of see what's available. The process of creating a new test plan or test cycle in DevTest is wizard-driven. So I can go ahead and create a new test cycle now. So when I create a new test cycle, I can do things like, copy from an existing test cycle. So if I have created a previous test cycle before, maybe a smoke test that I want to run every time I get a new build, I could easily just select that and click Finish. In this case, we'll walk through the process of creating a brand new test cycle. I can specify build numbers or any, other fields that I might want to add. I should mention this is all customizable. So this build number is just a custom field that I added. So, but any properties that you would want to have batch updated to all of the tests that you're going to assign out could be added to this interface, and then each new task that's created will be populated with these values. If I'm using the integration with DevTrack, I'll see a list of defect tracking projects that I can submit bugs into. So DevTest does support the ability to submit into multiple defect tracking projects from one test project. Next, I'll see the environments that are available to me based on the test plan, and I can decide if I want to test any specific ones during this test cycle. Next, based on the environments I've picked and the contents of my test plan, I will be able to see what test coverage is available and then make selections of what test coverage I want to run. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and run some of this test coverage, and I'm going to now assign out that test coverage. And we can see that I have some default owners selected based on some of the test areas have a default owner, or I could assign test coverage to a folder called to be assigned to go to the rest of the team. I'm going to click Finish and create a new test cycle now. So we can see now I've created test cycle 3 for build 200 with a planned finish date of this Friday. And I have 18 tasks assigned, no bugs so far, and nothing has been completed yet. My estimated time is about 52 minutes of test coverage. Remember, that's going to come from the estimates I set at the library level. And as my team starts executing those tests, I will see that actual time populated too. By team member, I can see exactly who I've assigned tasks to. In this case, I've only assigned them to Pam, so maybe I want to assign some tasks to someone else. I can easily select some of this test coverage here, or use the folder as a means to select the test coverage too. And I can click Edit and then assign it to someone else. And I should say I can update any of the fields that I might want to at that point too. So it's in addition to just being able to update owner, you can update any field that's on the form. And finally, I can view all that data by environment too. So I can see I have an even split of Windows 8 and Windows 7 test cases. Also, throughout kind of the demo and all the views we look at, we always have the ability to filter based on your users, status, or we can run queries based on any of the fields that you might choose to add to the system. So as you add fields to the template view or the task view, they're immediately searchable, reportable, and available as list columns. So now that we've created a new test cycle, let's take a look at test execution and bug submission. So when a tester logs into DevTest, based on their account type and the permissions you give them, they may only be able to see their own test assignments or perhaps their group, or if you are a user like the user I logged in with, I might have, the ability to see everything, so everybody's assignments in all projects. DevTest has very granular permissions that are available for each user account type, so that you can really restrict exactly what an individual would see. You can hide the project trees and also the test library trees too if you want, and you can even hide certain fields if you need to. When a tester logs in and starts executing their tasks, they can update them just by simply changing the status of a task. So maybe move this to pass. You'll notice certain fields turned red as soon as I move this to pass, like the actual time. So you can require that a tester fills out certain fields as part of the process. As I mark that test passed and click Save, I'll see that this icon indicates that that test passed. You can also customize the UI to make the text green or highlighted based on the outcomes. I'm going to execute another task, and in this case, I'm going to fail the test, as they often do. And when you fail a test in DevTest, whether you're using DevTrack or Jira or some other defect tracking tool we support, the user will be prompted to submit a new defect into that tool. You're also able to search the bug databases too from that interface, and if you're using the integration with DevTrack, you're also going to be able to see if that test has ever failed before in this test plan and if there is a link bug already. For the integration with DevTrack specifically, we do have the ability to map over any or all of the fields that are present on the task description directly to the bug record. So in this case, I have the title, the description, the platform, the build number, all mapped over so that the tester really doesn't have to do much more than add any additional information that you don't want to track at the task level. But you could really make it so streamlined that they can submit everything directly into the tool. So now we've logged a bug. So now from the link defects page, I can see specifically that there's a bug linked there, and it's assigned to Terry. And as Terry works on it, I'll be able to see those updates here also. Just like with some of the other properties, like updating the owner, like I did earlier, if a tester has permission, they could update multiple tasks at once. So in this case, I might mark a lot of items that we didn't run, so maybe we didn't have time to finish them. If a test has steps, or verification points, when the tester is going to run those, they will have to complete the steps before the task state will be updated. So in this case, I might mark the first step passed, but this will say in progress, but it won't be completed yet. But as soon as I click fail, I can see that the whole test has now failed. So it really would be based on the settings that you choose in terms of the rules you set up in the admin. So you might see that blocked is a higher priority than failed, so any blocked item will change the task state to blocked. Just like with failed, I can trigger a bug from a blocked state too, or any state that I wish to define as an applicable triggering state. I'm going to go ahead and submit a second bug. And then we'll talk about a few more options in the task and planning views before we hit reports. Okay, so now we've actually executed some of these tests. And before we go back to the planning view and see some of the more advanced planning features, I do want to talk a little bit about the tabs here. So we've already talked about the link defect tab, which will show you, each instance of the test in terms of when it's been executed and any linked bugs for even if you're using tools like Jira or bugzilla. We also have the history page, which will show you the full history of each test. So this will show you who executed it, when they executed it, and all of the properties of this test will remain exactly as when they ran it. So if you subsequently update a test in the test library and change all the steps, will preserve the history of who ran it and what it looked like when they ran it. You do have the ability to refresh a test if you want from UI. All you have to do is right-click to grab the latest version of the template if you want. But the idea is that by separating the library from the execution, we're able to more accurately preserve the history of what has happened so far. So we've gone ahead and executed some test data. Let's go back to the planning view and talk about some of the other options you have when you're creating a new test cycle. So now we've done test cycle 3. We're going to do a new test cycle 4. And this time, instead of selecting some coverage to run manually, what I'd like to do is look at some of the more advanced things that we do. So for this particular test cycle, I only want to run a regression of all the test cases that have failed so far in this test plan. So I'm going to click on the Add Coverage Using Query button, and I'm going to look for tests that have a task state of failed. So I'm going to click Search, and it's going to return a couple different test cases for me. Now that's only 10 minutes of test coverage. Maybe I want to test more than that. I can add another state, and I very well could have just done multiple states in the first place, but in this case, maybe I want to add block 2, or maybe I want to do something like add any tests that have not been used yet in this test plan. So now, looks like I didn't have too much additional coverage either, but you're able to add coverage based on things like the status, anything that you want to flag at the test template level. So maybe in the library itself, you want to say something's high risk or something is, I don't know, high priority. And then you can also use the defect data too as a basis. So if you're using the integrations with the other defect tracking tools, you can use the presence of a defect as the basis for assigning out test coverage. If you're using DevTrack, you could also go as far as use status and any other properties to do that also. So if you wanted to assign out only test cases that have a linked bug in a state of fixed, you could do that when using the DevTrack integration. Okay, so that's just one of the options you can do in terms of utilizing queries, which you can, of course, save and then reload as a means to assign out your test coverage. So we can easily create a new test cycle that only covers things that failed in a previous test cycle. As we accumulate all this data in DevTest, in the task report view, we will be able to see reports. So we have a number of different reports in DevTest. We have some graphic reports. So if I want to see by test cycle, what the status has been, and we can customize all these colors too. So if you don't like purple for new, you could change it. In this case, I can see that our pass rate's pretty good for the first 2 test cycles, but for some reason in test cycle 3, we didn't complete much of our work. I could then dig into some of the other types of reports we have too, and maybe learn more information. So I might want to look at a summary report, for example. And a summary report might tell me by test area, how much of our assignments were completed, how many bugs were found. These are really similar to the reports that you would see in the planning view, but you can also customize them further to include things like target data in terms of if you have a target number of test tasks, how many you've run, and things like that too. We also have the ability to print out some list reports. So I can create a list of all the tests that have been run or all the tests that need to be run. I can still utilize any of these filters, so it's easy to filter these list reports to get the data you want out of them. Each report can be customized, so you can pick exactly what fields show up in the report, and you can also pick what test cycles and green folders you want to include too. I can export any report to Word or Excel, and I can also send reports via email to users, even users that may not be licensed for DevTest. So I can send them a link to the report, they can bookmark it, and then anytime they click on it, they'll see a real-time version of that data. And then any of the reports that I have can be added back to my dashboard too, so my homepage dashboard. So that's a brief overview of how you would manage your test cases and your requirements and submit bugs from DevSuite. One thing I should have shown you, and I'm going to show you right now, is that if you are utilizing that process of linking the requirements to your test cases, you will be able to show a traceability matrix. And the traceability matrix will show you for each of your requirements how many tests were run and what the status was. So it's nice because you'll be able to see for each requirement exactly what has happened so far, did it pass, and then you can customize it further to include, you know, whatever fields you want to include. So I can just click on the property button and pick what fields I see for each section. So you really get that kind of built-in traceability out of the box. So now that we've gone through the tool itself, I wanted to see if there's any questions that we might have. And while I did, you know, focus mainly today on DevSuite for quality management, you know, we do have, you know, some great Agile development support too, and we would be happy to provide you with a demo of that functionality and walk you through our storyboards and burn down reports and such, you know, in either a one-on-one web demo or, you know, you can view some of the recorded demos that we have. All right, so we have a question here about test automation. How does DevTest integrate with test automation? So DevTest has an out-of-the-box integration with a tool called Test Complete, so that you can write from the interface link directly to scripts. But we've also, via the API, integrated with tools like, you know, some of the ones from Quality Center, like Quick Test Pro, Rational Functional Test, Selenium, and a number of different automation tools. The API will let you update any of the fields that are present in the template view or the task view, and it'll also let you do things like create new test cycles too. So let's see, when importing existing test plans from Excel, how do we link the steps through requirements? So if you have already defined your requirements, you can add the IDs to those requirements to the Excel import. Otherwise, you would need to import them via Excel and then manually link them. So, but each template can be linked to a requirement also. So that's one thing I didn't necessarily show in the demo. But in addition to creating new tests from requirements, you can also, of course, take an existing test case and link it to a requirement. A requirement can also be linked to multiple test cases too, which is pretty common too. In terms of, there's questions about the UI. How easy is it to restructure the tree? It's very easy. There's actually a tab where you can reorder the tree. You can sort the folders by alphabetical if you want, or you can just select move and move them to the locations that you want. In terms of browser support, we work with just about all the major browsers, including Safari. You know, you know, certainly the browsers are releasing on much more frequent cycles these days, so it's always good to check our website to see which version of, you know, Firefox we support or Chrome. But, you know, we always try to keep up with the latest, but sometimes they beat us by a little bit. Yeah, so there's some questions about email notification, which I didn't cover it all in the demo, but yes, there's built-in email notification for all of the views. And what the email notification allows you to do is set up triggers. So, for example, let's say anytime a new test cycle is created, I want to send an email to anyone that owns that or is receiving a task to be executed. So DevTest has a special trigger for that, and then each user would then receive an email saying you have a new test assignment, and that then can go to the system. We also have the ability to have emails by a triggering event like a task is blocked or anything that you might, want to define. But so if you use blocked, for example, then anytime a test blocker occurs, you can send an email to maybe the manager, QA manager, or something like that to let them know. So it's really extensive and customizable in terms of how you would use those email notifications. A question about supporting other defect tracking tools besides Jira, Bugzilla, and Mantis. We're always interested in adding additional tools. It's really just a question of whether or not that company has externalized their links and such, but we could totally look at FogBugs, which is the one that the person mentioned. There's a question about screenshots from the system. Actually, from the tool itself, you're able to submit a screenshot using the screen capture, so which is probably worth me showing really quickly, because that's a nice feature. So if I submit a new bug, I could either add a screenshot directly from DevTest, or during the bug submission dialog in DevTrack, I can click this capture button and then pick exactly what I want to capture. So I can capture this PowerPoint, for example. Maybe I want to redo it. Okay. And then I can bring it back to the tool and capture that. The neat thing about the built-in screen capture is it also allows you to annotate it too. So if you wanted to add a description or something like that, you could. Okay, let's see what else we've got. Okay, there's a question about connecting to the database. If you wanted to utilize third-party reporting and things like that, we do provide, at least for DevTest, we do have like the database diagrams and such that are available to customers with maintenance, so that they would be able to, use third-party reporting and things like that too. You can also, of course, use the API too, instead of going directly to the database, but it's not, the database isn't stored in a proprietary way that would prevent you from accessing the data. Question, can email notification be automated? Yes. So that is just the same triggering methodology that we used. It's supported. Question about Serena, using Serena defect tracking. We don't have an out-of-the-box integration with it yet, but we are planning to integrate with Serena too. A few more questions. Let's see. Yeah, so, okay, there's a question about when you can search for defects. So one of the options when I was looking at DevTest and I was submitting a bug was to search. Now, depending on what tool you're using, the search options will be different. So if I'm using Jira, for example, I can search by the bug IDs, and I'll just pull up a Jira search dialog and allow you to search that way. If I'm searching with DevTrack, I can search on any specific property that would be present for it. Okay. Let's go back to the questions again. All right. Does DevTest support versioning? Yeah, so we have a built-in feature that allows you to version the test cases and then roll back to a previous version if you wish. In terms of integrations, continuous integration support and integration with build machines or build systems, I have seen via the API, I've seen customers utilize their build machine to create a new test cycle in DevTest and to populate it with the properties that they wish to include. That has included things like the build number. It could include an HTML link to a build location or a SKU number or anything that would be able to be passed from the tool to DevTest. But DevTest can certainly accept that information and even spawn a new test case based on a previous test cycle. Question about linking stories and such to test cases in Jira. We don't have that as an out-of-the-box functionality currently. You could utilize the API to do that, to specifically link to the JIRA ticket that represents the story to the template. And then in that case, if you create a task from it, you could also then allow the user to click on that and view the story too. But we wouldn't have a traceability matrix or reporting that would be tied to that. Third-party project tracking tools, we don't support any out-of-the-box. You certainly could use the API to integrate with some of them. It would really depend on kind of what you were hoping to accomplish via that integration, and might be something worth having a conversation about. Okay, so does the defect auto-suggest based on failure? So one of the things that the third option on the DevTrack option was that it will show you based on the particular test that failed whether or not there's already a bug present and linked to it. So that might be one of the things you're looking for. If not, we could always have a conversation about it. Okay, so the other suite tools like DevSpec and DevTrack are kind of beyond the scope of the demo here today. We do have some recorded demos already online, but we tend to do this once a month or every couple months. And you are, we will certainly send you an email and let you know about upcoming webinars that would cover DevTrack or DevSpec or Portfolio in more detail. Okay, let's do a couple more questions because we're running out of time. Can you attach video content? Sure. Yes, you can attach. We don't really put a restriction on what types of files you can link. And let's see if we have, I saw one thing about minimum hardware specs. In terms of the hardware specs, RAM, and everything, they are all available on our website. So if you go to each product page, there will be the system requirements. And those are the system requirements for both a server or the individual client machines. And I'm actually running the entire thing on a not-so-fancy laptop with SQL Server and everything. So it really, what sort of hardware you need really will depend on, how many people and how much data you're planning to have. It does scale very well. As I mentioned in the PowerPoint, we do have that multi-site functionality that will allow you to have, multiple sites, thousands of users, and tons of data. Okay, so that's it for today. We are going to, this webinar will be recorded or has been recorded. It will be available on our website in the next few days. If you do have follow-up questions and you are working with an account manager already, I would be happy to answer any of those questions. Any questions that came in just recently via email, I will answer them back via email afterwards. All right, thanks so much for your time today. Have a great rest of your day, and don't hesitate to ask us additional questions. We'd be happy to set up a web demo or a conference call to discuss them. Thanks a lot.